is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. Volleyball season has arrived again. And we have ourselves a marquee week as the Big Ten Conference opens up conference play this week. Yes, Big Ten Conference opens up conference play. And we have two noteworthy matchups from that conference as well. One of which will be number 9 Penn State at number 24 Michigan, and the other will be number 13 Purdue at number 1 Wisconsin. Who are the key players, and which team will I pick to go 1-0 and eventually 2-0? Pac-12 has released its women's volleyball schedule as well. And we also have some news from Pac-12. It's not really the best news, but it's not really the worst news. But what are the marquee matchups for the Pac-12 this week, if there are any? And we got some news from the Big West Conference. It happened this past week. It happened on Friday. But honestly, I might as well share it again. It has to do with spring sports. Is it good news or is it bad news? All that and more here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this glorious Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday evening, wherever you are listening to. Heck, it could even be Tuesday morning for all that we know. So, without any further delay, let's get on in to some volleyball news. Yes, we have some volleyball news to break. So we'll start from the Big West Conference. So the Big West Conference issued a statement from courtesy of all of the Big West Conference commissioners and officers, or big timers, the big wigs, that the Big West Conference will be doing everything that it can to make it to work their way back into spring sports for this year. So that is a really good thing, because that means men's volleyball and beach volleyball is going to be happening in the spring when it comes to the Big West Conference. And that is awesome, because I was a little questioned on if there will be any men's volleyball or beach volleyball this year when it came to the Big West Conference. So, yeah. But I'm glad the Big West Conference, they haven't officially made that statement, but this was courtesy of Andy Fee, the athletic director of Long Beach State. And I'm glad there will be men's volleyball and beach volleyball. So that is superb. Now let's get on into our second bit of news. We have the Pac-12 releasing its women's volleyball schedule. I can't believe it. They just released it today. I was wondering when the Pac-12 women's volleyball schedule was going to be released, because I was like, it's almost time for volleyball to come back, and this was the week for it to come back. And then I saw Oregon's schedule pop up, and I'm like, a Pac-12 women's volleyball schedule. And then every other schedule kept coming from left to right, and it was awesome. It was great time. So the Pac-12 schedule is out. The slated matchups for this week are for Friday, January 22nd and Sunday, January 24th, Arizona at Utah, Arizona State at Washington, Cal at UCLA, Oregon at Washington State, Oregon State at Colorado, and that's pretty much the last of it. Now, if you're paying attention, you're probably wondering that I'm missing two teams from that match slate. So, match slate for this week. So, the two teams that actually aren't playing because their matchup got canceled this week are Stanford and USC. Yes, I am disappointed. It brings me no disappointment it brings me major disappointment to tell you all that Stanford will not be opening its title defense this week, as their matchup with USC is officially canceled. And unfortunately, they use the word canceled because they won't be able to make it up, and it really sucks because I was looking forward to USC and Stanford playing. I couldn't believe it. I was just perplexed that they can't as soon as the schedule gets released. The first words that I saw were, "This week's matchup with USC has been canceled," and I was so sad. And big shout to Larry B in the chat rooms. He says, "Cecilia and I just saw The Miracle Season a few days ago. That was a great movie." Oh, that's awesome. I gotta get into. I think I remember seeing that, and not seeing. I remember seeing a trailer for it, but I haven't seen the movie. I gotta actually see that because I hear it's based on a true story. So anyway, back to Stanford. And don't worry to all the USC fans. There's nothing wrong with USC's women's volleyball team. It's because of Stanford and the Santa Clara guidelines. So here's the release from the Stanford women's volleyball team. In light of Santa Clara County Public Health Department's current emergency directive, Stanford's first 4 matches at USC and versus Colorado at Maples Pavilion have been canceled. And then it basically just talks about the Santa Clara County restrictions and all that. So it's not so much I'm disappointed for Stanford. I'm obviously disappointed that Stanford's not going to be kicking off their season because they're the reigning champs. I'm a little bit more disappointed for USC because they kind of didn't do anything wrong, and unfortunately because of guidelines, they kind of aren't going to be playing this week, which really stinks because I think USC is probably the most disrespected team in the NCAA. I think they have talent this year. They have a few good returners like Raquel Lazaro and Brooke Botkin, and then they have a few other up-and-coming players as well, and they got some transfers in to go with it. Sure, they lost Kalia Lanier to graduation and Jasmine Gross and a few other players, but I think USC can do some damage. The last time USC was doubted in the Pac-12 was, I think it was 2013, where they were chosen to finish 6th in the Pac-12. Turns out they actually finished tied for first in the Pac-12 with Washington. That was the year with Sammy Bricio, and I really would have liked for USC to have won the championship that year. Dang Kansas for ruining everything. But I digress. So, the worst part for USC's series getting canceled is because now they unfortunately have no game this week. They have no matches this week, and they have to wait till next week where they get to kick off their season at Oregon or Oregon State. I'm sorry, not Oregon. Oregon State, Corvallis. And USC can't even get like non-conference games, which it is possible to have non-conference games. Like North Carolina has non-conference games. They get to play East Carolina and App State before their season begins, but unfortunately for USC, it's looking like it's not going to happen unless, of course, we get some news. And if that happens, then cool. Then USC gets a new opponent. But this isn't going to be like the NCAA football where a game got canceled or postponed because of a COVID outbreak or something along those lines. Like, they can't just find an opponent and say, "Oh, that's going to be our substitute." It's not going to fly like that. And it's disappointing because I really would have liked to see USC. I'm saying that because I'm partially a homer, but I also say that because I want to see if USC can build off of last year. I mean, I think many people forget USC beat a team that was 33-1 in the first round of the NCAA tournament. In another state, mind you. Like, technically, Stephen F. Austin isn't the greatest team in the world, but the fact that they had to win in the state of Texas was quite amazing. So, I'm a little disappointed to see USC not being able to play some volleyball this week, and I'm personally sad-faced. But that's okay, because USC is still going to prove the Pac-12 wrong anyway. My only fear is that I hope that this doesn't cost USC a spot in the NCAA tournament, because playing a top tier team like Stanford definitely boosts your resume in terms of making the NCAA tournament. And everyone has to remember, the NCAA tournament is now a 48 team field as opposed to being a 64 team field. As in, a team that is talented, that's probably not in a Power 5 conference, could get left out, and vice versa. Like, it's not going to be, if a Pac-12 team finishes 500, they're guaranteed a spot. They're still guaranteed, well, not guaranteed a spot, they're still in the running for an at-large spot, because there's only 18 at-large spots and 30 automatic qualifiers. And I know I said I think USC could prove the Pac-12 wrong, but the conference is pretty loaded this year. Stanford, despite losing Jenna Gray, Morgan Hentz, and Catherine Plummer, is still up there with all their talent. UCLA returns the reigning Pac-12 Player of the Year in Mac May. Utah is still always talented. Washington, despite losing Kara Bejima to graduation, is still up there. They opened their season against Arizona State. Like, I think this is going to be a very tricky season for USC, but I have confidence in them. I think they can do it. Like, it's crazy to say, but I think USC has the Trojans. I think everyone just doubts USC because they have a new head coach in Brad Keller, and they lost their dynamite player in Kalia Lanier. But they do return a bunch of other talented players, and like I said, they got transfer players from a few other colleges as well. So I think it might be a little bit of a struggle for USC this year, but I don't see them finishing like, I don't know, like 6th. I could see them like finishing like 4th or 3rd. Like, I think USC thrives off of adversity and doubt. It all depends on what the coaches poll has them listed at in the preseason. They haven't released that yet, which I can't really say where USC is going to be finishing. I just think they're going to finish 4th or 3rd. And who knows, maybe they could challenge, like, Washington. Like, it's tough to win at Galen Center, honestly. Like, and everyone needs to remember that USC beat Washington last year, and Washington was one of the more premier teams, having knocked off Stanford. So I think USC has a shot. Do I think they can go deep in the NCAA tournament? That depends, because they first got to make the NCAA tournament. And this year's field is very limited. Like, even a talented Power 5 team could get left out of the big dance. Not that it's going to be Baylor or anything, because Baylor's probably still a lock, and Kansas State in the Big 12 is pretty much a lock. But I digress on that. So, if I had to pick a noteworthy matchup for this week from the Pac-12, I'd probably pick Oregon at Washington State or Arizona State at Washington. Oregon is coming off of a year where they had a disastrous year where it was just a nightmare for them. Like, they had 3 players transfer to Hawaii. Yes, 3 players from their team from the previous year, not last year, but the year before, transferred to Hawaii. And they just had a lot of growing pains. They were young overall. They kept losing matchups they probably should have won. I think they had a couple matches where they blew 2-0 leads, which is tough because young team and all that. But I think Oregon is going to be an interesting team to watch for, because if there's one coach that can turn them around, it's Matt Ulmer. And he's a respectable coach. Like, you can't cure inexperience. You can't coach experience. It's all about time. That's pretty much my thing. And then Arizona State, they finished above 500, but then they missed the tournament because there weren't enough teams. Like, I think last year's NCAA tournament was the strongest, or NCAA was like the toughest field, and even some of the better teams got left out. Like, Cal got left out, Pepperdine got left out, Georgia Tech got left out because Georgia Tech wound up winning the NIVC, the National Invitational Volleyball Championship. Like, it was a miracle that even the Big West had 3 teams in the NCAA tournament, and that's not a Power 5 school. But I guess you also have to factor in RPI and strength of schedule and whatnot, and all those other statistics, which which basically makes the decision making process of which team gets in and which team doesn't get in like a lot tougher. So yeah, and Larry says 2-0 lead. Yeah, and there have been a bunch of teams that have been on the other side of 2-0 leads, even Wisconsin. So yeah, which I'll be getting into in a little bit as well. So that's pretty much the Pac-12 spiel of things. Like, again, I really was looking forward to Stanford, USC, but they can't control it. USC can't control it. Stanford can't control it. The NCAA can't control it. It's basically guidelines. And if USC does find a non-conference opponent, cool, but which team's going to want to go down to California? And they can't. And the worst part is they can't even get like the Big West Conference teams. Like USC can't even get a Big West Conference team because the Big West Conference canceled all their fall games, all their fall sporting events as well. And there was also an idea that Hawaii could be in the Pac-12 this year, but that's not going to happen. I mean, the Pac-12 has to field, 12 teams? 12 teams, and that would be a nightmare for that conference to field a 13th team. And it's just so much schedule conflict. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with USC and Stanford and everyone else. So now let's get into the Big Ten. The Big Ten is a conference I was looking forward to. Last week, my guest, Emily Eman, and I talked a little about Northwestern. And this week, we've got a full plate of Big Ten volleyball matches, which is going to start on January 22nd. And there's going to be also some Sunday matches, which, actually, there's only one Sunday match. I don't know why there's a Sunday match when it comes to the Big Ten. Don't ask. But let's look at this Big Ten schedule. So the Big Ten schedule is actually given to me by Emily Eman, my guest from last week. And she was actually slated to be on this week, but unfortunately she had a lot of stuff to take care of, so she kind of had to take a rain check. However, Emily will be on here next Tuesday. I'll give you all the guidelines for next week's show, so it's going to be awesome to have Emily back. As we also say hello to Marcus Losgreat in the chat room. He says, what up, what up, what up, no. Thank you for joining me, Mr. Marcus. And I pretty much just finished talking about USC and how their game against Stanford got canceled because of the Santa Clara County guidelines and all that. So Larry, you and myself will have to wait until we see USC women's volleyball play for another week. So it's too bad, but again, it is what it is. So now for the Big Ten schedule. So the Big Ten schedule consists of Illinois at Iowa, Nebraska at Indiana, Illinois at I already said Illinois at Iowa, Penn State at Michigan at Penn State, Rutgers at Northwestern at Rutgers, Ohio State at Maryland, and Purdue at Wisconsin. So there's your matchups. I'm pretty sure I got them all. Oh yeah, we also got this weird matchup which starts on Saturday and Sunday. We have Michigan State at Minnesota. Michigan State and Minnesota play on Saturday, and then their second matchup is on Sunday. So keep in mind these matchups consist of two Big Ten teams facing one another in one location. So take, for example, Illinois at Iowa. Those two will be playing on back-to-back nights at Iowa. They're not going to go from Iowa to Illinois or vice versa. It's going to be back-to-back nights in one little location. I guess that's to limit the traveling and the jet lag and the lowering the risk of COVID and whatnot. So there's that. So that I think that's what it is. I'm not 100% certain, but that's just my idea. It's a good idea, honestly. Every other conference has done that. The Big 12 did that. The ACC did that. The Sun Belt Conference did that, even with 3 matchups, two of which were played in one day, which I still found a little ridiculous, but it's whatever. Who am I to judge? The fact that they even had that conference tournament is still unbelievable. But anyway, so let's get the not so exciting matchups out of the way. We have Illinois at Iowa. Illinois, they're not the greatest team. They've kind of fell out. They've kind of fell off. Iowa is a little promising as they do return one of the more prominent freshman players, being Courtney Bazario, who is a 6'5" setter slash middle blocker slash opposite slash outside slash. She pretty much does everything. You get the point. So I think that Iowa will be a surprise team for this year, and I think that they could turn heads, but I think Iowa is still a couple of years away. So there's that matchup. Then we have Nebraska at Indiana. Indiana looks very promising this year, but Nebraska is just way more promising. I think Indiana can have a better year than last year, but I think Nebraska returns all of its players. They didn't graduate one player from last year, and they return everybody. They are led by Lexi Sun, who is their talented outside hitter. And remember, that team last year that didn't graduate any seniors, or had no seniors, made it all the way to the Elite Eight, which is pretty darn impressive if you ask me. And they were a 5 seed, so they faced a lot of adversity, but the fact that they had that young team and they made it all the way to the Elite Eight is pretty darn impressive. So I have Nebraska dominating Indiana. Then we have Maryland at Ohio State. Now, Ohio State's kind of the interesting team. I think they have a little bit more upside. That I for sure have them as more upside than Maryland does. Nothing against Maryland, but to me, I think Ohio State is probably most likely going to dominate against Maryland. And it's at the Ohio State. So if I had to put money on it, I'd say give me Ohio State. So then we've got Michigan State at Minnesota. Minnesota returns pretty much its entire team. They did lose a few starters, but honestly, I think Minnesota is not going to skip a beat this year. They will struggle a little bit against the top tier competition, but I don't see them struggling against Michigan State. So I got Minnesota beating Michigan State. Marcus says Wisconsin looks like the team to beat in women's volleyball. Facts. And I will be talking about that a little bit later. So just to speed this along, we have Northwestern playing Rutgers at Northwestern. For purposes of, I don't want to badmouth either of these teams too much. I think Northwestern has a little bit more upside. Now, I'm not just saying that because my guest from last week is from Northwestern. Well, my past 2 guests are from Northwestern, but I think Northwestern has a little bit more upside, and I think the culture of their team has been changed, and it's thanks to Peyton Chang. So I got Northwestern beating Rutgers, and yeah, and that's it. That's it for the not-so-worthy matchups. Now let's get to the worthy matchups. So the first noteworthy matchup for this week is number 9 Penn State at number 24 Michigan. So Penn State, let's take a look at Penn State, and let's break them down number by number. So Penn State has a whopping 1 senior this year, and she's not even a senior. She's a graduate student. So theoretically, Penn State has 0 seniors. They do, however, have 7 juniors, 5 sophomores, and 5 freshmen. Their graduate transfer is Hannah Flowers, who transferred from Memphis. She had 383 kills, a 330 hitting percentage, and she had 71 digs last year for Memphis, for the Memphis Tigers. And I don't know if Memphis has really cool jerseys like the football team does, Larry, so don't be asking if they do. Okay, but overall, Penn State, they did lose a few players to graduation. They lost Kendall White, who is the all-time dig leader at Penn State. They lost Tori Gorell. They lost Keaton Holcomb, their defensive specialist, and they also lost Allison Cathy to graduation as well. They do, however, return Johnny Parker, a right side junior who also might be playing setter, which I don't think that might be happening, but you never know. Russ Rose is a unique type of coach. He is the longest tenured coach in the NCAA women's volleyball scene. Like, nobody can take that title away from him. He has been coaching for Penn State for 41 years. 41 years and counting. That dude is impressive. So, anyway, back to Joni Parker. Joni Parker had 413 kills, and she had 195 digs. And she had 42 service aces, which led the team in that category as well. So, but I kind of don't understand why she's listed as a setter. Like, maybe she plays setter. I don't know. Yes, and Marcus says 1,299 wins. Facts, Marcus. There you go. So, other players that Penn State returns are Gabby Blossom, their junior setter, who had 1,332 assists. She had 273 digs, which was the second most on the team behind Kendall White's 474. And she also had 54 kills to boot as well. Penn State also returns Jenna Hampton, who their defensive specialist, and their possible projected libero, who had 183 digs, and she also had a kill. So there's that. She had also had 25 assists, but she's supposed to be the defensive specialist in the libero, so that doesn't really matter. But anyway, Penn State also returns junior middle blocker Serena Gray, who had 317 kills, 60 digs, and 92 overall blocks, which was third on the team, which is quite impressive. And yeah, she's one of many juniors that Penn State returns. And then finally, in terms of standout players, Penn State returns Caitlin Horde, their junior middle blocker, who had 310 kills. She led the team in blocking with 149, and she also had 18 digs, which doesn't matter. She led the team in hitting percentage with 440, which is pretty darn good. Pretty darn good for a sophomore last year. So that's Penn State right there, and with the addition of Hannah Flowers, that just makes Penn State so much better. It is tough for them because they have no seniors, minus Hannah Flowers, their graduate student, but I think this team is still the pretty dominant team as expected. And Marcus says the Phil Jackson of women's volleyball. He's referring to Russ Rose, and that is major facts right there, Marcus. Major facts. So now, let's jump to Michigan. Now, Michigan, at first, I was a little skeptical, and when I saw their team from this year, they lost quite a bit of players from last year. They lost Kylie Hamacher, Katrina Rockefort, Natalie Smith, Mackenzie Welsh, Sydney Wetterstrom, and Corey Crocker to graduation. Basically, and those were all their standout players. They lost 6 standout players to graduation, and then Michigan had one player that opted out, Kiara Shannon, who was on last year's team as well. So shout out to Michigan, who put that on their roster, who said players that have opted out for the 2020-2021 season, they're that one player. So there's that. But, however, Michigan does have a few talented players they return from last year. So, Michigan returns their kill leader from last year, Paige Jones, a junior outside hitter who had 463 kills, and she also chipped in 262 digs, which was third on the team, which is pretty solid. You know, I expect outside hitters to have a high dig count, considering they're pretty much scampering to keep the ball alive just as much as the libero. So there's that. Then we have Jess Robinson, a sophomore middle blocker who in her freshman year had 226 kills and a hitting percentage of .316, and she also had 75 blocks overall, which was third on the team, which is pretty impressive. So good stuff on her part. Now, in terms of setters, they lost their setter to graduation, being Mackenzie Welsh. They do return 2 sophomore setters. They returned Katrina Glavanich, and they returned sophomore setter Maddie Dowd. They didn't really see too much action last year. Dowd played six sets, which I pretty much assume is like 2 matches, and then Glavanich played 35 sets, which is way more than that. Which is way more than 2 matches. So I presume that Glavanich is going to be the starting setter for the Wolverines. So anyway, other than the setters, they also returned middle blocker Jess Robinson, who had 226 kills, and she... Oh wait, I already talked about her. My bad. I'm tripping. So, by the way, Jess Robinson is a sophomore, if I haven't said. So the last noteworthy player that Michigan returns is May Petrovsky. I've seen May play, and she is a beast. Her serves are pretty much, if you're not prepared for her serves, she's going to ace you. May Petrovsky had 244 kills, and she had 64 digs. She had 36 service aces, which was second on the team behind Jones, who had 39. And she had 81 blocks. She is a middle blocker and an outside hitter, which makes her very, very... What's the word? Versatile. That's the word. Versatile. So yeah, and like I said, she had 81 blocks. Though the 81 blocks was actually second on the team. And keep in mind, May Petrovsky was a freshman last year. If she's putting up those numbers as a freshman, I'm actually quite scared of what she could do as a sophomore and a junior and a senior. But I see a bright future for May Petrovsky. So that's pretty much the noteworthy stats and returning players for Michigan. As for the noteworthy notes for Michigan has 0 seniors on their team. Yes, they have a whopping 0 seniors on their team, which makes them very young. They have 5 juniors, 5 sophomores, and 5 freshmen. So they're pretty balanced for the next few years, including this year. But this year's kind of going to be a little bit of those growing pains where they have no senior experience, and they're playing in a very loaded conference. But here's the thing about Michigan. They're number 24, which kind of makes me wonder how this team got ranked. By the way, I think their opt-out, Kiara Shannon, is a junior this year. So theoretically, Michigan has only 4 juniors this year at their disposal. Let me just double-check that... Kiara Shannon was the senior. So theoretically, Michigan had 1 senior on their team, but she opted out. So now Michigan has 0 seniors, and they have just 5 juniors, 5 sophomores, 5 freshmen, which... that's going to be tough if you're Michigan. And you're playing in a loaded conference such as the Big Ten with teams like Wisconsin, Penn State, Nebraska, Minnesota, so Purdue. So Michigan has a lot to prove this year, and they have a lot to prove this week. So here are my thoughts on Michigan, or Penn State at Michigan. So Penn State is clearly the better team in terms of returning talent and verticalization, if that really is a word. And then coaching-wise, Russ Rose is a mastermind. I wouldn't count out Michigan, honestly, just because Michigan still has some talent on their team with Paige Jones and May Petrovsky. Or Pertovsky, not Petrovsky. I'm sorry. It's Pertovsky, my bad. So, but honestly, Michigan is good, but I don't think they're good to knock off a team like Penn State. I will guarantee everybody this, and I promise you all, if you all are listening, I guarantee this one thing is going to happen for the up-and-coming Penn State at Michigan women's volleyball game. The Penn State-Michigan women's volleyball match will be much better than the Penn State-Michigan football game from this year. Book it! It's gotta be, because I think Michigan has some upside, despite Penn State having the better talent and the better everything, I think Michigan can give Penn State a battle, especially since it's at Michigan. So I think Penn State wins both of their matches, but I think Michigan in the first match will give Penn State a tough time. That's because it's at Michigan. They want to prove that they belong in the top 25. They want to prove that they can hang with some of the Big Ten teams, and they also want to prove that they're not just a doormat. They can hang with some of these teams. Like, looking at Michigan's season last year, they lost in the second round to Kentucky, and they actually came close to beating some of these other teams in the Big Ten. They came close to beating Purdue last year. They came close to beating Minnesota at home, and those were home games, by the way. They obviously lost to Ohio. They beat Ohio State twice, which I guess is good. I guess that's good. Of course it's good. But there weren't too many standout wins for Michigan last year. Sure, they made it past the first round, but they lost to Kentucky. What can you do? But either way, Michigan did beat Notre Dame, which I guess is noteworthy, which is cool, because Notre Dame, Michigan is always a fun rivalry. But I just think Michigan is they'll give Penn State a battle the first match, but then once Penn State figures out everything, it's going to probably be a clean sweep the next match. But I think that's going to be a great matchup between Michigan and Penn State. I think Penn State is on a mission to prove everyone that they have not lost a step despite graduation and whatnot. And here's a little fun fact for Penn State women's volleyball. Penn State started off the season number 9 in the preseason polls. Penn State has been in the top 10 for the past 383 weeks. And they've also been in the top 25 the past 509 weeks. That is impressive. That deserves an applause button. So yeah, when Marcus was saying Russ Rose was the Phil Jackson of volleyball, he was not kidding. 1,299 wins, along with 383 weeks in the top 10 and 509 weeks in the top 25 is pretty darn impressive. And this team is always a perennial NCAA team, and also they're very talented in terms of the Big Ten, and they've won the second most NCAA championships. There's not much to say. You look at all the accomplishments and feats that Penn State has had. That is courtesy of. It all starts at the top with Russ Rose. He's done an amazing job, and God, I can only imagine how much longer Russ Rose wants to coach. But I think Michigan is kind of going to have one of those rough games. But I see a bright future. I see at least some progress for Michigan. I think Michigan can still stay in the top 25, but it's going to be tough for them going forward because they play in such a loaded division. So there's that. And then, hey, at least next week they get Michigan State. That shouldn't be too difficult, but I digress. Alright, so we're going to take ourselves a quick little break. When we come back, we're going to preview our second noteworthy volleyball match of the season, and then I'm going to get y'all out of here. So you're listening to Set Point right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hey guys, it's Blake Henley, better known as H-Town Blake to some of you. Happy to announce that Bases Loaded is back and in full force. We'll be bringing that high heat every Tuesday night here on IE Sports Radio. So come home, get ready, dig into that batter's box, and see if you can chase that high heat, baby. So we'll be coming to you live with all the stats, all the rundowns, all the division rivalries, and every team that's going to make the playoff push to get to that one and only October and get to the pinnacle of what baseball is, to hoist that Commissioner's Trophy when it's all said and done.
What's good, fight fans? It's your boy, Marcus Los Great, here to give you what you want, here to give you what you need. Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm coming to you live, straight from your mama's basement with a crispy, awesome white tea. We are coming to you live every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Powered by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And you can tune into all of our amazing shows right here on IE Sports Radio. You can catch them on Spreaker, you can catch them on Spotify, SoundCloud, TuneIn, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, you name it. And that last drop was Marcus Los Great's drop for Gloves Off. He will be coming on at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. In other words, he's going to be on in about an hour and 15 minutes from now, which means I pretty much got to speed up. And also, going live 15 minutes after me is, or actually immediately after me, is the NorCal Faithful Show with Big Dan. He will talk about NorCal sports, and he'll also talk about maybe he'll talk about Cal women's volleyball playing UCLA this week. We'll see. But now I gotta get into our second noteworthy matchup of the week, and I'm saving the best for last. Number 13 Purdue at number 1 Wisconsin. Marcus said it best in the chat room. He said Wisconsin looks like the team to beat this year. He is absolutely correct. He is not wrong. No lies detected. Here we go to preview this matchup. So here's the thing about Purdue. Purdue has 2 seniors this year, but they also make up for it with 5 juniors, 5 sophomores, and 5 freshmen. So they're a bit on the young side, just like Penn State and Michigan, but they have talent. They didn't lose too much talent from last year. They only lost Blake Mollier and Shavona Catino from last year, 2 of their kill leaders from last year. They do return their kill leader from last year, Caitlin Newton, who had 445 kills, which was pretty darn impressive. She had 1,222 attempts as well, so that is very good. That's her arm must have been sore after every match. And by the way, she is a senior outside hitter. She's going to have a big year this year. Also, Purdue returns Grace Cleveland, who had 394 kills, hitting percentage of 270. She also had 132 blocks, which was second on the team behind Blake Mollier, their outside hitter who graduated last year. And then also Cleveland had 139 digs. And then also Caitlin Newton had 165 digs, which is pretty cool. Not gonna lie. And then Purdue also returns its defensive specialist / libero, Marissa Hornung, who had 475 digs, which led the team. I'm pretty sure she and someone else is probably projected to be the libero this year. Their other dig leader was senior defensive specialist Jenna Otek, who had 424 digs, which was second behind Marissa Hornung, which you can make the argument that either one of them will be the starting libero, and thank God I'm not the coach, so I can't make that decision on who's going to be starting libero and who's going to be defensive specialist. But I digress. Other players that Purdue returns are sophomore outside hitter Madeline Koch, who had 36 kills, Emma Ellis, who had 139 kills, and she also had 34 blocks to chip in as well. They also returned their redshirt junior Haley Bush, who is a setter. She had a whopping 1,311 assists, and she had 70 kills to boot as well. Now, Purdue's main weak point is their middle. They pretty much returned one middle from last year, and that middle happens to be Jael Johnson, who had 59 kills. She had 44 blocks, but again, their middle blocking core is pretty much on the young side. I think they have two other freshman middle blockers, and that's it. So I can see this team steering away from the middle blocker position, but I think they make up for it with athleticism on the outside and right side. I think this Purdue team is going to be exciting to watch. Purdue made it all the way to the Sweet 16 before losing at number 1 Baylor. They even took a set off them, which is pretty darn impressive. The only problem with taking that set off of Baylor was that it was too close of a set, which doesn't win you games. So last year, Purdue finished 15-2 at home last year. So they know what home court advantage is like. My only concern is that will they have that same home court advantage? Because I don't think they're going to have fans. Because their opponents this week won't be having fans this week, and they won't be having fans this year at all. So anyway, as for Purdue's opponent, their opponent is number 1 Wisconsin, the heavy favorite to win the NCAA championship and the Big Ten, which is basically redundant, but I digress. So here's the thing about Wisconsin. They have 8 seniors this year. 8! And 5 of those seniors are returning All-Americans. That is bonkers, bananas, poggers, you name it. They have 1 junior and 3 sophomores as well. And they also have 8 freshmen, so their future is lining up to be something bright as well. Something to note is that Wisconsin has a 6'9" middle blocker who is the tallest player in Wisconsin history. Their only problem is that she's ineligible because she is an early enrollee, and that's a no-no. Early enrollees cannot play on the team, no matter what the circumstance is. So she's pretty much going to be a student, and soon she's going to be on the court just dominating. Once Dana Retke graduates, obviously. So looking at Wisconsin, now for their returning players. Their obvious returning player is Dana Retke, their senior middle blocker, the Big Ten Player of the Year last year, the collegiate. I want to say she made the U.S. collegiate team as well. Team USA's collegiate team as well. So this girl has just been all over the place. She had 413 kills, which is the kill leader for last year, and then she also had 159 blocks. And she's just an overall stud. Like, if I were to list off all of her accolades from last year, I think it'd be 6 o'clock right about now. 6 o'clock my time, but I digress. So Dana Retke is your returning middle blocker. Behind her in terms of kills is Molly Haggerty, who had 411 kills, second behind Retke. Oh, and by the way, something to point about Dana Retke's 413 kills. She also had a hitting percentage of .399. That right there. If you're hitting into the high 300s and 400s, you are definitely hitting the mark, and it's absolutely amazing. And she even mentioned in a little bit of an interview that she gave a few players concussions. She feels bad, obviously, but this girl Dana Retke is a freaking wrecking ball. So anyway, Molly Haggerty, redshirt senior outside hitter, 411 kills. She also had 133 digs. She had 18 aces and 47 blocks. She is also an All-American as well. We also have Natalie Hart, another senior middle blocker, who had 206 kills, 320 in terms of hitting percentage, and 131 blocks, which was second behind Red Key in terms of blocks. So their middle blocker position is lights out. In terms of their setter/defensive specialist, Izzy Ashburn, a sophomore, returns as she had 249 digs, and she also had 49 assists. I guess she's going to be used mainly as a defensive specialist because you'll see who's returning as a setter. So, but it's good to have Izzy Ashburn as a backup setter. It's good that she's versatile. So, anyway, returning setter for Wisconsin is Sydney Hilly, who had 1,396 assists while having 241 digs and chipping in 54 kills as well. So Sydney Hilly is just the quarterback of the team. She is basically Patrick Mahomes, except not really. And then their last noteworthy returning player is Lauren Barnes, who's most likely going to be their libero this year. But she had 291 digs. She had 26 service aces, and she is a returning senior defensive specialist / libero. But I can see her as the libero this year. They did lose Tiffany Clark to graduation last year, but they make up for it with Ashburn and Barnes. And those two are a deadly combination in terms of digging. So, overall, if there's a year that Wisconsin's going to be winning the NCAA championship, it is this year. There's no way, and in terms of beating Purdue, in terms of Purdue versus Wisconsin, I got Wisconsin winning. Now, I don't think it'll be easy because Purdue has a lot of talent. They're just young. Like, Wisconsin has the experience, and that's going to pretty much triumph over Purdue and its talent. Other than that, if the game was at Purdue, I would totally pick Purdue, but to win at least one match. But I got Wisconsin winning both matchups. My only fear for Wisconsin is that I hope they don't peak at the worst time, because hopefully they don't peak too high, and then when it comes to NCAA tournament time, they don't lay an egg, because sometimes that happens. Sometimes teams get hot from the regular season, and then they cool off unexpectedly in the postseason. Look at what happened with Texas. Number 2 seed, they were the number 2 seed. They were co-Big 12 champions with Baylor, and they lost in the Sweet 16 to Louisville. So, but when it comes to Wisconsin, this is a loaded team right here, and this is definitely their year. They have to win it this year, because I don't think they're ever going to get another chance at winning a championship like this. Because you look at the talent. You look at Redkey, Haggerty, Loberg. That's another player I forgot that they had. Grace Loberg, senior outside hitter with 355 kills, and she had 79 digs and 41 blocks. That's another player who they have. This Wisconsin team is absolutely loaded, and they can do a whole lot with this team that could help them win the NCAA tournament. And I really, really, really hope that they're able to get the job done. I'm not trying to root for them, but I just think that they have the potential. They have the keys to the car. They just got to put the key into the ignition, turn it, and then just let it ride all the way to the championship. And there's no doubt that they have the best player in the Big Ten in Dana Redkey. For them, it's just about possible rust from all the way back from December to now, and then possible challenges from the Big Ten, because you look at their schedule from last year, they lost 6 games. They lost to Marquette, which I think that was a little unexpected. They lost to Baylor, it was expected. They lost to Washington both times. Kind of expected, but not really. Then they lost to Ohio State in Big Ten play. Definitely not expected. They lost to Penn State after they held a 2-0 lead, which, as Larry B said, that is brutal. Their only other loss from last year was against Stanford, which Stanford was Stanford with Catherine Plummer. But this has to be the year Wisconsin puts it together. Like, this is probably like, they are probably like, what's a good team to compare them to? Probably the Baltimore Ravens. Like, this is like the Baltimore Ravens or Kansas City Chiefs of NCAA women's volleyball. They have all this talent, but now they got to go out there and prove to everybody. And I think they can. It's just about who can challenge them. Like, Baylor is up there, Texas is up there, Kentucky's up there, Stanford, once they get everything in order, is kind of up there. Then you have to look at their conference, such as Penn State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Michigan, Purdue with this week. Heck, maybe even Ohio State could challenge them. But I think Wisconsin has that it factor. And they have that hunger in their bellies, saying that they know they could have probably challenged Stanford better from last year, and they're hoping they could send their seniors from this year off with a win. And it would be quite stunning if they didn't. So I got Wisconsin winning both their matchups this week, and then I don't see them losing too many games this year. I think I have them seeing like maybe losing 2 at best, but that's probably going to be like to like Penn State or Nebraska. We'll see how it goes. But for this week, I've got Wisconsin winning. So I think that's going to be it for tonight's show. Before we sign off, I have to give a shout out to our sponsor, the official sponsor of IE Sports Radio. That is Legacy Financial. It's been a tough year, and it's looking like 2021 could imitate 2020. But staying positive, keeping your faith, and continuing to work hard is the goal. If you're ever in a financial struggle and you need some help, call 951-732-0130 or 510-928-2104 to book your appointment today. Andrew and I are just 2 people on a mission to help families build a legacy. You can follow them on social media, on Twitter, at legacy_uncut, and on Instagram, at Sims_uncut. So definitely do follow them. Thank you all for listening to me rant about volleyball. We're 73 episodes in. So one last thing before I sign off is that next week, Emily Eamon is going to be back on the show. She was my guest from last week. She was the volleyball player from Northwestern. And Set Point will be on next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. This is to accommodate Emily's busy schedule, and I'm happy to do so, and it's going to be a great time. So that's going to be it for Set Point. Without any further delay, it is time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you all for tuning in to tonight's episode of Set Point. If you're listening live, I definitely appreciate it. Big shout out to Larry B for popping in the chat room, and Marcus was great for popping in the chat room. I enjoyed having you guys in the chat room. It really meant a lot. Thank you to everyone that tuned in on the replay. For everyone here at iSports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. But don't go anywhere. Our next show, the NorCal Faithful Sports Show with Big Dan, is about to go live any second. Once again, thank you for tuning in. Have yourselves a great rest of the week, and I shall see you on Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Good night, everybody.